everybody. Hi, welcome. You're here. We're watching stuff. I'm on a sofa, so I'm going to be all cozy. It's good. It's good. I believe I am unmuted, and I did it 90% correct. Welcome in, everybody. If you're new here, hello and welcome. You're watching GeekSpaceTV. We're going to talk today about RPGs. That's a thing we do a lot of here, and I've apparently been doing them for a while, so I have some expertise. We're going to use air quotes on that one. Hi.
No.
I like to pretend that I don't know what I'm doing, but that's not true. It's part of the persona. So welcome in, everybody. How are you all doing today? So today's plan, we've got two things on the docket. We're going to talk about what behind the screens is going to be like. We're going to do some talking about stuff, so you're welcome to ask some questions and things like that. Yeah, Mangleperk, you've never had good sleep patterns. Don't say that. Don't put that on me. Hello, Unspeakably. Thank you so much for that 3-month resub. And then we're going to do a little bit of planning we're going to pretend Anna's not in the room because she's not supposed to know about this, which is Crossmas, our special 2-part episode. So you're going to help me build the characters' sheets. So we're going to learn a little bit more about how Cypher System works, which is cool. I was like, oh, that's a thing I need to do because it's in like 3 weeks. So we're going to build all of the character sheets, or as many of them as we have time for today, using Cypher System. So we're going to kind of talk through, and you'll learn a little bit more about what that system looks like. And you'll also find out who the various players are. I might not tell you who the players are. I'll just tell you the characters, and then you can assume who the players are. But maybe we'll be throwing you for a loop. We'll see. So that is our plan for today. But hello and welcome in. As always, you're watching or not as always, but currently you're watching GeekSpaceTV. We're a nonprofit broadcasting studio. We're based in Seattle, and we work to help promote and create diverse tabletop RPG experiences. And this show is about really kind of helping everybody access this particular hobby and activity, and enjoy being part of this, doing it themselves, for themselves, or with other people. What are all of you Europeans doing here? What are sleep patterns? Who needs to be awake or asleep ever? The cheat sheets. And you can support us here at GeekSpaceTV in a lot of different ways. You can subscribe to the channel and bits, all of the usual tips, or Twitch stuff. You can also support us through direct donations. So the bar, wrong side, it's this side. I never get that right because it's mirrored on the camera. Or not mirrored, I don't know, whatever it is. So it's right here. You can see it's our weekly goal. It's moving, slowly moving this. So if you can help, I will read out the donations as they come through. You can also check us out over on Patreon and sign up for a regular monthly donation, and that will go all of those go massively. Thank you, William, for donating $10. Yeah, made it in time. I hope I am able to impart some wonderful and special knowledge for you. Hail the Red God donated $5. Teach us your ways. # the Red God giveth, the Red God taketh away. I only take things away when players give them to me, and then I'm like, yes. So that is the moving donation part. That's what we're going to be doing today. Even miss 1 a.m. Go order this thing from this website. Well, I feel like other people aren't helping you have good sleeping patterns, and you and your friends need to have conversations about the importance of sleep. We talk about that. Sleep is very important. So, I think that's all the spiel stuff. After this, Anna, who is here but normally will be coming in partway through this, will be doing a wind down where we hang out and we chat about what's happening in the studio. So she'll be talking about some things then. And I thought she was like running on, but she's not. Oh, no. But we have props. This will be for later. Just put this right here. Oh, I guess it's not on screen at all, but this is for later. I'm glad she's prepared. It's a majestic red. Ooh, fancy. I'm getting fancy in here. So that'll be at about 6:30. We'll switch over then. And then next week on Monday, we have Eat, Pray, Kill. Wednesday, we have Worlds Beyond. So that is Eat, Pray, Kill's finale. I'm pretty excited. Not next week, because next week there isn't I just realized next week there isn't behind the screens because I'm in England.
Oh, you're in? Okay.
Yeah. I put it that way on the calendar, and I definitely did not tell anyone.
That's
okay.
fine, because I'm not going to do...
Cool. So next week, this isn't happening, but we'll be back the following week for 2 weeks in a row before we take a break for a week of Christmas.
I won't be.
Well, I'll be back.
Like, I mean, I'll be here.
You'll be here next
after,
week.
After
Okay.
Christmas.
After
Not
Christmas.
next week. I'll talk about it on Wine
She'll have her schedule, I'll have my schedule, and they're not necessarily the same thing. But that reminds me that I need to update the schedule for GeekSpace, because that's my job. I like calendars. Regardless, eventually, one of my goals for this show is, because it shouldn't just be about me, because I am not the only person who does this, nor am I the only person with knowledge about streaming and playing and running tabletop RPGs. So I want to bring on other people from both GeekSpace as well as from other communities. I'm sure I'll get that information to you later, Mangled Pork. So one of the things that I really want to do is to bring on other people and have them talk about their experiences, and you can kind of pick their brains as well, because I think that's equally as important. So obviously one of the people I want to bring on is Steph, because she has done her first ever RPG here on Twitch, here at GeekSpace, and so that's something that I think is a really interesting and important experience that I want to talk about and kind of do a not post-mortem, but I guess kind of a post, well, we'll find out, maybe post-mortem for Eat, Pray, Kill. We'll see how it goes for everybody. So yeah, that's one of the plans for the show. So I'll be bringing on, so if you have suggestions for cool people you think I should talk to, feel free to post them over in our Discord. We have one of those channels. You can be like, hey, this person's real cool, you should reach out to them, Lauren. And I'll be like, I'll try. Debriefing, that is probably the correct word. As opposed to post-mortem. I mean, it's not necessarily wrong to say post-mortem, but debriefing sounds a little less bad. So, that is one of the things. Yeah, that's one of the plans. I want to bring on people both from GeekSpace, but well as from other spaces and communities to talk about their experiences with tabletop RPGs. There's like cool, there's a lot of cool people in Seattle, I feel like, that I should reach out to, so we'll see what happens. Like Post-its on the wall? We have Post-its. There's Post-its here. They're on the wall. I'm touching them. Yeah, these are still from our last fundraiser. We'll talk a little bit about the next one.
Yeah, you're welcome to stay for more down
I may stay for a portion of it, but then I need to go make dinner. Because I'm an adult. I'm supposed to eat food. A retrospective. Yeah, that could work, O-City. Could be retrospective. So we'll find out. So. Excellent. I'm gonna drink some water. Like an adult. So let's start with, because today's kind of just gonna hang out and talk for a little bit, because I want to get some feel from the people who are here, the sorts of things that they would be interested in being kind of major topics. This run of Behind the Screen is probably going to be somewhere in the region of 6 to 8 weeks. And yeah, kids aren't supposed to eat food. No, kids don't drink water. It's a well-known fact. They're like camels. So I kind of want to pick your brains and let you pick my brain about the sorts of things that you'd be interested in discussing as part of playing and running tabletop RPGs. If there's any just like larger general topics or more specific topics that people are interested in. So I can potentially tailor some of the streams around that, or think about the people that I'm bringing in around the bent of those things. That being said, it's also my job to come up with what's happening here, so it's not just going to be what you say to me. Also, if you would like to, there's a link in chat. You should click that link, and then you should do the retweets. Also, if you are able to do so, the hosting of the channel is appreciated. I guess everybody here has to have a Twitch channel. That's technically how Twitch works. So feel free to spread that one. I'm going to retweet the one with the correct link in it. Yeah. So do that. Cool. So starting with kind of just like, if there's general topics, I'll write them down. I'm also happy to answer like specific questions, and then we'll probably do that for a little bit, and then we'll dive into creating the character sheets for our 2-part Crossmas special, and you can kind of see some of the thought process that'll go into what Cypher System looks like, and then also just how my brain works when I'm going to interpret things. And we'll do a little bit of collaborative thinking from on what that session might look like. What are some of my options? Like, what's my thought process going to be? So in terms of prep and planning, is it set up to highlight words? That's a good question.
Set it up to highlight. What do you want?
Just the word like question. Probably be handy. If it has, but so prep. Prep is a big part. Prep is both a huge and tiny part of GMing, which I say that in a sort of weirdly ironic way. So one of the things that I have a tendency, especially on RPG streams, is I end up double prepping for multiple episodes. And it's a little interesting when you think about running an RPG as opposed to more of like a traditional home game. And a lot of when I was playing non-streamed RPGs, those games would be longer, and so I would have more content in an individual session. And I would tend to think of them as sessions, whereas now what I would have typically done in one session for a home game tends to become 2 episodes in a streamed RPG. I like to give a little bit more space for things to breathe, and it also does tend to allow more time for the players to interact and roleplay with each other, which isn't something that you always get in a home game. It can be massively variable. It depends on who you're playing with, the game, the system, and the setting. But it's, like 12-hour sessions. I don't think I ever did one of those. I think we maxed out at like 9 hours or something. It was very long and went far too late into the night. And no one was really having fun by the end of it, but we were doing it. And so, but when you have that time frame of a streamed RPG or a recorded RPG, you kind of have to be a little bit more concise. Or I guess precise with your timing. Like, if it takes 5 hours, people are going to get salty, so you got to cut it off at 3 hours, which means what is that going to look like? So, in terms of planning, though, that doesn't answer the initial question, which was how much time do I actually spend prepping. It's a really interesting thing, because I think we have a tendency to forget, and I think this happens with a lot of creative things. We have a tendency to forget that people do a lot of background processing. So I spend a lot of my time planning, not actually like in the activity of planning, like creating stats for characters or writing my actual physical notes. So a lot of it is more around I've got a double chat window. No, it's okay. So a lot of it is the amount of time that I take to sit down. A lot of it varies. Oh no, it's cool. It varies for me. Factors like you mentioned, at the beginning of a show, if it's a new show, prep will take longer. But I consider the like upfront prep, the sort of world building stuff, separate to episode prep. So per episode or per session, it'll depend on how many enemies they're facing, and sort of how narrative versus like technically complex I want the challenges to be. And so that goes a lot back and forth. Like when I've done Shadowrun, building an individual run would take a while, because I'd have to make all of like the NPCs that they're facing, the map for the location, and then like all of the extraneous challenges that they'd be encountering. But tied into that, as a show goes on, or as you get more familiar with the system, like towards the latter half of me running things like Shadowrun and D&D, I would just have stat blocks to pull from. So I'd be like, cool, it's a basic guard, here's my basic guard. Here's my basic guard, like, and I could rinse and repeat, like, recycling things every episode. So one of the things you can do to shorten your time is recycle. Reduce, reuse, recycle. It applies to both life and tabletop RPGs. How far back did Prep for Worlds Beyond start? Probably not including reading about the system. I think once I decided on the system, oh goodness, I don't have my notes for Worlds Beyond. I don't put notes on them. I was like, wouldn't have put a date on that. When did I start doing initial planning? Once I picked that it was Worlds Beyond, I want to say I was reaching out to cast members. When did we start? Did we start in September? No, I started in October because I did To the Point first. But I think we did our first practice session our second practice session 2 weeks before our actual first episode. But yes, I think it's important to do a lot of your planning, especially per episode planning. You need to know who your characters are in your story. Because your story should emphasize the characters, should be because of the characters as opposed to because you want to just tell a story. If you want to do that, go write a book. Like, if you don't care about the input of the other people at the table, then you probably shouldn't be playing an RPG. So in terms of Worlds Beyond planning, I'm trying to think. I actually struggled the last episode. The part that took me the longest and the part that takes me the longest a lot of the time is coming up with the names for everything. Because I am not good at names. Will there be a vampire game, as in specifically Vampire the Masquerade, or a game set using vampires? Because there are two different answers depending on that question. White Wolf was kind of not great, so the likelihood that we will ever play a Vampire the Masquerade game on this channel is very slim. Playing a game with a setting involving vampires, totally possible, but largely dependent on whether or not a GM or someone pitches a show that would involve that sort of setting, and they'd be excited about doing it. So it's kind of variable. We tend to go, rather than saying this is a show that we want to run, we normally have, at least what we've done so far, is someone says this is a show that I want to run, and we say we think this is a good fit for our channel, as opposed to being like, oh, we really want to use this system, now let's find a GM to run this show. But names are really hard, and I'm going to send you a list of them because I wrote them all down this time. But for me, that's something that slows down my planning process for an individual episode. What takes a long time, because that's the sort of thing that I know I struggle with coming up on the spot, whereas events or action isn't something I struggle with as much. Yeah, well, they're kind of getting shut down. It's a very strange... there may be a Vampire Worlds Beyond episode. I want to kind of touch base with some of the players. So one of the things that we did do in Worlds Beyond, and this is where the question about pre-planning. So part of the reason the most recent episode went to essentially Mad Max Post-Apocalyptic Wasteland is in our first planning session. So we did a character creation session and a practice session. So we did 2 meetings before our first episode. So in our first session, which was character creation, we covered a lot of the things that I think are really important to do upfront before you run an RPG. And this is also stuff that I have learned in the process of having to do these things. I want to be clear, the first RPGs that I ran, we did not talk about what people's knows, what things they wanted in a game, what things they didn't want to have in a game. And there's a lot of tools for that, and we can talk about that as a separate piece for getting set up and starting. It's a thing that I think is important. But so one of the things that I asked them specifically for Worlds Beyond Us, I was like, this is a genre hopping show. The idea is that your characters will pop up in a lot of different worlds over the course of the show, and what places do you as characters want to go to? Or as players, I should say. What are you personally excited about? Thank you so much for the host, Deceptive Mirror. And so they gave me a bunch of different ones, but one of the ones that they gave me was the Mad Max style sort of world. So that was what the players were excited about. So I was like, cool, I am going to come up with a reason why they're going to end up in this place and plan around the things that the players are excited about. Because I personally am a big fan of Alice in Wonderland, but I recognize not everyone is. So we're not necessarily going to go there if the players aren't particularly excited about it. So yeah, that's the current. That was one of the factors that I took into account when I was planning Worlds Beyond. I tend to plan specific episode and then have a very rough idea for where I want the show concept to end. It wasn't so much that the tone shifted. I think the tone is what I said, but like I did not initially come up with like a full list of everything that I wanted to explore. I was like, these are still some things, and we'll probably still go to some of the ones. Yeah, the locations did change, and there's still plenty more locations to go to, but I definitely wanted to incorporate settings that the players were excited about, which is why it's important to upfront ask players, like, what are the things that they're interested in.
Can you read the question for you? Like when you were replying to something in chat, can you read it first?
Yes.
I'm getting chat onto the thing, but if we export these to YouTube,
That's a good point. Yep, I can do that. I'm rambling a lot at this point, but that's pretty normal for me. So, other questions? Other things people would want to talk about? Excited about, like, the bad baby dimension. That was not a planned concept. Thank you, Anonymous, for gifting a subscription to Share. Question from Iffy. Would you take suggestions for a place to go to from the community or chat? So I've had a personal, like, mixed relationship with community involvement in planning an RPG. And I think for me personally, and this isn't necessarily true of all RPGs or all GMs, for me personally, I would like to set up an expectation at the beginning of a show of the community being involved, as opposed to later on. I have done it for other shows, and in those cases, I find it works best if I give, rather than an open-ended, for like the case of Worlds Beyond, like, where would you want to go, it's would you want to go to A or B? And I found that is more successful for me. One, because it often narrows down the options that I have to work with, but it also means that I feel like the option A or B is higher quality, because I've already thought about them and I have a concept for them, as opposed to like someone being like, we're gonna go here, and then just throwing it out there. And it directs people's focus too. So rather than like 7 people throwing out 7 ideas, I can get 7 people to vote on 2 options. So I think if you are ever running a show where you're trying to ask for input from a community, my recommendations would be narrowing down options and creating something that's a little bit more streamlined, so it's not just like people throwing out ideas at you. But with Worlds Beyond, one, because we have kind of a limited number of episodes, but also because one of my goals is to make it exciting for the players, my first priority will be what are recursions that the players want to go to, and then what are recursions that the community might want to see. And that's just the way that I've gone. Yeah, game planning like an eye exam. What's your preferred destination? A, B, A, B. Which one? And then B, C, B, C. You know, you just keep flipping. You just keep flipping back and forth. So I think it's not impossible that I'll be soliciting feedback from the community for it, but not something that I'm set up for right now. Pumpkin's question. How much of what you plan for tends to be based around casual, offhand remarks / jokes by the players, like the bad baby recursion? I want to be clear, the bad baby recursion is, I'm not ever planning on going there. I do not need a recursion full of creepy babies. Like, that's just not a thing that I need. I'd like to take inspiration from what the players contribute into the world, And this was the case for Leviathan. This was the case for Corporate Sins when I've done that. And any show, I think it's really important, particularly in a show, but I think in any game, that the players have some agency over what that looks like. And so isn't the bad baby recursion just reality? We're all bad babies on the inside? What? So having, to me, the offhand remarks that players make, I make a decision, are they canon or are they not canon? And as soon as they become canon, then it's something that's part of the universe that exists. Like Meadow-Stickos, that became a thing in Leviathan. Those are real. Like, the players created them, so I can refer back to them as something that is part of the setting. In terms of offhand remarks leading to full-on plot lines, it doesn't tend to happen as much, but can sometimes be an influence. I often will use player reactions to things more to influence the action. And there's a couple of examples of that. Is there or is there not a Mandy recursion? Probably not. Maybe? Artie Snack, Arden SC says, when you are coming up with the worlds are you looking at available suggested worlds and then modifying them, or coming up with your own ideas? Both. In particular with The Strange, I'm using both. So Arden, which is the first world that they went to, is an established world from the book. I've pulled that almost entirely wholesale, and all of the parts that are made up are just because I could not remember all of the details from what I read, and so I just filled it in with things that made sense. Or I'm filling in details that are different. But then for other worlds, I have made them up entirely. So like the Wasteland, that is just, I watched Mad Max and I said, cool, that exists now. But with some modifications, it's a little more Roman because I guess I've been playing a lot of Assassin's Creed. So that's a thing. But yeah, the with Worlds Beyond, it's specifically a mixture. With other shows that I've done, I've swung both directions. There's a lot of value in taking existing things because then it takes a lot of the onus off of me to have to create it, and instead I can just go look it up, and then I can create things to fill in the blanks for anything that's missing. But it also means like you can't be wrong if you go and you make it all up yourself. Hello, Mina. Hello, welcome in. So it kind of goes both ways. With your follow-up question, I'll come back to yours, Hrothgar. I'm going to do the follow-up question, which is, how do I go about building out existing worlds or populating your own? Really depends on what I need the world for. In the case of a show like Worlds Beyond, or Leviathan, like in Leviathan, they were probably never going to visit an entire planet. So I need to populate the areas of the planet that they would go to. Like, they're going to go to the building, the corporate building. They're going to go to a spa. Here are the places that are within the world that they probably will visit. And then I need to know enough about the world that if they go off map, I can logically create something that would exist in this setting. Like, they're like, I want to go on a shopping spree. And I'll be like, this setting would have a mall. Las Vegas, exactly. So it kind of varies a little bit with what I need the world for. But I tend to think, what are the things that they're going to encounter first? And those are the things that I need to flesh out. And everything else just needs to be enough background knowledge to know how I could fill in the gaps. And that's definitely something we can get a little bit more into in terms of how I build the worlds for something like Worlds Beyond. Let me make a note of that. Because some of the stuff that I'm probably going to do, at least on episodes where it's just me, we're going to go, like, we'll do some of the building and I'll kind of, like, talk you through maybe an example. But, and partly because I know in something like Leviathan or Worlds Beyond, they're not going to spend a lot of time in any of these places. I don't need to spend a lot of time myself, like, truly creating this elaborate world. But if I was going to run a game where it was all taking place in one city, I would spend more time up front being like, what are things that exist in this city? So the amount of world building you need to do kind of is influenced by the amount of time your players are going to be spending there. That's definitely one of my thoughts. I'm going to scroll up slightly because I missed a couple of them. Ooh, it's right here. Oh no, scroll. I need to scroll. I missed a couple of questions. Alright, so I've got Hrothgar asking, what systems, character creation, stats, skills, process do I like best and why? That was a big question. But I got a couple of, like, go-to things, and then I'll get back to your questions, Sal. So, one of the, it depends. I kind of like point-buy systems, just like as an overall concept, because they're really flexible. Point-buy systems, depending on the system, to be clear, can often allow you to get really creative with your builds. Like, I want to do these two entirely unrelated things, and I want to be good at both of them, and you can often build your character in that way. Depends a little bit on the system, because sometimes you just can't put enough points in different things to, like, actually max out that ability. Whereas a flat, like, class-based system kind of typically means you're just going to tick off of a series of lists of what it is you want your character to do. And it can be a little bit harder to, like, mix and match or get creative with it. Like, in D&D, you can multi-class, but you're a little bit stuck even if you are multi-classing. Like, there's only so much granularity that you can achieve of, like, well, I want my character to be good at this one thing, but I also want them to be good at this thing. And you tend to sacrifice being, like, really good at anything. Because if you want to try and do both, that's just kind of the system they have set up for it. Whereas, like, a pure point-buy system, you can be like, I'm going to put points in dex and points in charisma and points in nothing else, and I'm going to be weirdly acrobatic and very good at talking. And, like, you could potentially do that. And then in terms of level up, as a GM, it's way easier to keep track of leveled systems with with just a milestone leveling. It's way easier. It's super easy to plan around because you know roughly how good everyone is at stuff, and you can just, like, tell them when they level up. As a player, it's way less fun. It's more fun for me to be given points and I get to decide when I want to spend them, as opposed to just, like, being told, okay, now you get to level up. So it's really variable. My perspectives in that instance on player versus GM are very different. In terms of being a GM, though, for the way characters are built, I don't have a strong opinion either way. Yeah, but we can talk more, because we're going to get into some character creation today, building some example characters from Cypher system. I just inadvertently answered Sardonic's question about official sizes of recursions. Yes, there are. The book gives you a lot of information about how to build a recursion. And then Sal asked, when doing session 0 with the players, do I tend to have them all around a table or in the same Discord chat at the same time? Or do I shoot them guidelines and they just email me back? Really depends. My answer to almost everything is going to be, it depends. But in that case, it depends on how the game's going to be played. Any hints or peeks at Worlds, we'll get back to that. So with session zeros, if you're going to do an in-person game, I'd recommend an in-person session 0. If you're going to do a streamed game, I would recommend a streamed session 0. I actually separate out planning and session 0. To me, I actually think those are two separate meetings that you should have. And one of those should be with everybody together at the same time in whatever way your final game is going to be done. And the other one can be way more variable. So the actual session 0, where you're practicing the rules, where you're playing your characters, you're trying stuff out, and you're kind of all just feeling everything out. That one should just be done however your show's going to be. In person, if you're all there. Streamed, if it's going to be streamed. Or whatever your home game's going to look like. I have had issues with, like, people couldn't make it all together for a session 0 in person, so I've done one streamed even though we're going to be playing in person. I like the idea of goal-based XP systems. Nice. But the other session, which is the more planning-oriented one, and that's where I talk about, like, what characters do people want to play, and like what sort of tone. That's where I would do things like lines and palettes, like what do people want to have in the game or not want to have in the game. That one should just happen in whatever way is the most convenient to make it happen. Ideally, also like session 0 in whatever way you as players can have it, or are going to do the game, but I have had situations where we're not all going to be able to meet, and it's hard, and so I've streamed it, or I have done it through like Discord posts or questionnaires. It works least well, I find, in a written format, and works best in a verbal format, just because communication tends to be missed and people don't always see things. But that's just personal experience. If you've got a particularly good group that's particularly good at communicating and like tippity-tappity with each other, then I would definitely say, like, yeah, do it that way. That's fine. And you can also do both. Like, you could start a discussion typed in a Discord or via email, and then eventually move that into here are things that I've learned, so you can have a more efficient in-person meeting and maybe combine it with session 0 if you need to. Because we all know one of the biggest challenges of RPGs is getting everybody there. It's not the running, it's not the playing, it's the people management. That is your challenge as the GM. That is genuinely, for me, one of the hardest parts of GMing, is getting everybody organized. Getting them all in the same room, characters, plan, and blah, 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 blah. Scheduling. We can talk about scheduling. I can tell you all my strats. My schedule strats. The people management. How do you get people to do stuff? I definitely, William, yes. I don't seem to stress the leveling up in shows. I don't. It's just not... It's not a thing I personally care about, either as a player or as a GM, that much. So I don't tend to over-stress it. If he asks, do I call my players at 3 a.m. and wait outside their homes before they go to work? No. That would be rude. I wait outside their homes at 2 a.m. I call them at 2 a.m. and wait outside their homes when they get home from work. That's much more normal. So, cool. Excuse me. Much more reasonable. Exactly. You've gotta accost them when they're tired from a long day. That's when you really gotta get them. Those are all excellent questions, Hrothgar, and I want to have a whole session talking about safety at the table. Feelings. I don't know why I'm putting exclamation points after every single one of my notes. Just technically.
Because you're really excited.
I am. And I do fancy exclamation points. I don't know why. Pumpkin asked, do I have a typical plan when building new societies and or races or cultures? Again, it depends. A lot of it's based off of the context of the show. So in Worlds Beyond, my plan is that I start with what is the genre that this world takes place in. The genre in this case, post-apocalyptic wasteland. vampires, like what, a video game high fantasy RPG. So what's the setup? And then from there, I can pull all of the tropes that I like that I want to have, and then we're good to go. And we've got comments. We've got like a core concept. If it's a different show, then I might think about like with Leviathan, I'll also use resources that the systems give me. So like in Leviathan, I would go to the planet randomizer and I would look down the list. I never rolled for it, but because I'd always be like, oh, I don't like that one. So I just looked down the list until I was like, oh, I like this one and I like this one, and I'm going to put them together, and then that gives me a concept. So I will build them kind of out of the necessity. Unfortunately, it is not highlighting the questions, Iffy, so it's okay. I'll just...
Sorry, I cried.
It's fine. I'm just going to pay attention.
But now chat's on screen.
Sweet! Chat is on screen. Excellent. Nice. I like it. Can you scroll up and chat a little bit? I think there's a question I missed. How much detail do I... Oh, yeah, there were two. Okay. Emotional situations and then detail for planning. I'm still going to reread the question just so I can pay.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. So, Hrothgar's question. How do I plan/create highly emotional situations, or do I allow them to mostly develop organically? And how do I debrief afterwards? So it's kind of a big part. There's 3 parts in that. How do I plan for them? 2 parts. And then how do we, as a group, deal with them? That's actually also one that I want to talk about, and we should bring this one up again when Steph's here, because she had a very different experience with her group of players, because her groups of players are different than my groups of players, in terms of debrief particularly. So setting up for situations, I like to think of that sort of thing in GMing as I'm teeing up the ball for them, right? Like I'm giving them the setup. I'm still always going to rely on my players to be the ones to knock it, to like hit the ball. I'm really bad at sports analogies. That was my attempt at a sports analogy. I don't know how that went. But you can put as much time and effort into setting up a potentially emotional situation, and the players may not engage with it, and they run off to somewhere else and they do something else. But sometimes they won't. So I like to think of them. It went perfect. Thanks, everybody. I think of it from my end is I look at either, like, first I answer the question, who do I want this to emotionally impact? Do I want this to be an emotionally impactful situation for one specific character, multiple characters, or the whole group? And then I start sort of pulling apart the threads. And these are the things, it was vaguely golf or t-ball. I did somewhere in between. These are things that I then, so I kind of figure who I want this to impact. And so let's say it's a specific character. Then I think about that character as a GM and what I know about them and what the player has told to me. And sometimes I can just come up with it right away. I'm like, I got a good idea. Sometimes I'll reach out to the player and I'll say, hey, I want to poke at your character's backstory or your character's feelings. And then I ask them some specific questions about, like, so really good example. My goal for the Worlds Beyond Creepy House episode was I want to give a somewhat emotional, impactful exploration of these characters' inner thinking and these backstories. So for every person on the show, I already had some ideas, but I didn't know for sure. I reached out to them and I asked them 2 things. I asked them for a location where their character would feel safe and comfortable, and a person that was important to them that in their life. And so with those 2 things, then I set up a scene for each character that was, you're now in this space where you feel very safe and very comfortable, and you're with this person that's really important to you. And that's the tee up. That's me setting up the ball for them. Then I need them to knock it off and say, like, yeah, I'm going to have an emotional reaction to this. I am going to invest in this. I'm going to care about it. Because they could have been like, yeah, all right, cool, whatevs. And then just done nothing. But they choose to engage. Like, perfect example. Keeson says, rolls a natural 20 on figuring out that this is an illusion. And then he makes the choice for his character that his character is going to stay in the illusion intentionally. And like that is a perfect example of, cool, I set you up for an emotional situation. You know, you're here with your missing wife and child. Like, that's a big deal. And then he's like, it's mine now. Welcome to feelings. And so that's the kind of example. Is it's a 2-part process. So you're always going to rely on your players to take any of it. But that's an example of where I wanted individual impactful moments. Like these were one-on-one experiences that we were going to have. If I wanted it to be a group experience, I might think about what are the conflicts that the group has within itself. Where are places where the group might disagree, or have like strongly different opinions. And that can happen a lot with like a team episode. So Morva in Leviathan would be my example of what are the characters. Each character is going to potentially have a different opinion over what to do in this situation and how to feel about it. And so I can ask them, I can essentially present a situation to them, but I'm still relying on each of the... I was also, Pumpkin, not prepared for Keeson to say that he was staying. I was just like, this is like a birthday present. So I can set up a situation where characters might have conflicting and different opinions about it, but I'm still then reliant on the players to have an interaction between each other about their different and conflicting opinions in this situation. Whereas Ziana can say, but it's my ship, and Kika can say, yes, but they're a person, they have a personality. So it's about thinking with its individual, like what are the things that are important to a character? What are their drives and their motivations? And when it's a group or more than one character, it's often what are their conflicts as a group? Where are the places that they don't necessarily agree? And what are potential sort of points? But as a GM, you can only ever set up. Your players have to be the one to make the move, to actually take what you use, and have a reaction to it. So it's a little bit of both, and you get better at it the more you present those sort of situations to your characters and your players, and they'll learn to take more of them and run with more of them. But the flip side of that is that as a GM, when they take it, you've just got to sit there and listen, or you've got to respond. Like if it's a one-on-one with an NPC, you've got to buy into it as much as they do. And if it's a group situation, that's where you shut up and you listen, which I think is really, really an important, like, listening is one of the most important things you can do as a GM. We can talk about that in a second. I always forget that it's just mirrored. There was another question that I want to scroll up. How much detail do I plan into my story arcs, and do I plan improvisation when your players inevitably go off the rails? Cool. So feel free, if it has been a while since you've asked your question, feel free to repost a question, because I might forget them. I'm going to try and remember yours, DM, about Pine and appearance and consent. Thank you, Noctavito. How much detail do I plan into my story arcs? And how do I plan improvisation? So my strategy for planning, and again, this is very different, and this is why I want to bring Claudia on, because Claudia's planning strategy is almost the exact opposite of mine, and I think they're both equally valid, and I really want her to talk about it. So my strategy is looking a lot at, I plan in nodes. Sounds gross, but I plan in nodes. So I plan a sort of a segment or a scene, or like a moment. So maybe it's often you might think of those as encounters. But they're typically very pliable. So most of my planning is the beginning part of a session, and then the end is all response. And so you'll notice in my notes, and we can do this at some point. We can plan an episode together. My notes, a lot of them are, here's all the setup, all the information that I'm going to give to them. Here's some information about my setting for questions they might ask. And then it just starts becoming questions, or options, the players could do this, do this, do this. So last night, let's talk for a minute about last night's Worlds Beyond, because this is a solid example of improvising. I did not plan my narrative, my story arc for last night's, and this is spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen Worlds Beyond yet. It went, they arrive, Jade and Dale arrive first, they get taken to the city, and then they get separated. Jade will go to the Coliseum, and they'll put Dale somewhere else. Then the rest of them will arrive, they'll meet up with the motorcycle gang, and then rescue. That was it. That was my plan. The first half of the episode, the first hour is all of and the last section is rescue. And so I'll put notes around that of being oh, they might break in. Here are challenges that they might encounter. Here are the guards. But that's it. Literally, my last half of the plan was rescue. It fell apart at the first section. I got Jade and Dale there and taken to the city, and then I got the rest of the group meeting up with the motorcycle gang. And then Dale said, "I'm an oracle," and I'm like, yeah, you are. That's where this is going now. And so the entire plan of them being separated and Jade being the one to fight, all of that, I'm yep, that's not happening. And so then all of the section with them meeting the person, being invited, going to watch it, that all wasn't planned. The other group getting attacked also wasn't planned, but I was we need a fight. So I've got some stats here for random people. So let's use those stats and have a fight. And then I was I'm going to try and capture one of them. My objective as the GM for the fight was to get one of them so that now one of that group was going to fight in the Coliseum, because I liked the narrative idea of two people watching as one of their friends got stuck in the pit to fight. And that's what I wanted. And if I captured all of them, cool. If I captured one of them, that's fine too. And then the scene plays out and the fight's playing out, and Claudia whiffs her roll to jump into their car. And so I'm yeah, no, you get in, but they capture you in the process. And so that was the entire, everything from Dale saying, "I'm going to pretend to be an oracle," was off the rails. But it wasn't at the same time, because it was not what I originally thought. But it's still within the context of what I was planning. There's still going to be a rescue. There's still going to be fighting. There's still the use of my set pieces that I came up with. So I think of it a little bit more as I'm taking on the designer role to create all of my set pieces, and then I'm just going to throw a bunch of actors on stage, and they're going to forget that they had a script, and they're going to just make shit up. It's but they're going to have a set, so they're going to be ooh, this prop I found. So yeah. That's a lot of that's an example. We can definitely go a little bit more into improvising as a strategy, as things to talk about. Because I think that's one that's easy to say, oh, you just improvise. But it's really hard to execute and to be comfortable with that and to get used to doing it. Yeah, I mean, a list of things that can happen. There's a lot of potential strategies for stuff that you can do when that happens to you, and a lot of it's planning for what is the thing that makes you the most comfortable. That's going to make it easiest for you to deal with those challenges when inevitably people do things that you did not expect. Also, we're done with spoilers now for the most part, probably. So DM's question, which was for the situation involving the change of Pine's appearance. Never mind, we're not done with spoilers. Take that back. So last night we had a Thor Ragnarok moment with one of the characters. Is that negotiated beforehand? Is it something requested, or did I ask to do it? So I don't know if you noticed, but when that moment happened, I'm pretty sure, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I asked Claudia, is that okay? Because no, that wasn't discussed, because I never planned on capturing Pine. Yes, Hrothgar, thank you. Debriefing emotional situations. Because I never planned on it, I couldn't ask her for permission beforehand. If I'm going to do something major to a character, so some of you may know of a show that I did, which was Shadowrun show. And I had a character who volunteered to be part of a blood ritual sacrifice. And to save some people's lives. It was the whole thing. And that character was like, yeah, I want to sacrifice my eyes. And so I was like, okay, sure, I won't stop you. That's the thing you want to do. He's like, I've got it all thought out. I know exactly how we're going to deal with this. And so I agreed to it. I was like, yeah, this sounds great. This is what you want for your character. I'm not going to stop you. I would not have set him in that situation without his permission. Like, if I wanted to do something like that to him, I would have been like, hey, I have an idea. Would you be okay with this? And I think it's important to do that, especially if you're doing something that functionally doesn't fit within the rules. Like, there's no real rule in Shadowrun for blinding someone. There's no, like, called damage sort of thing. And specifically in this setting, like, there's, like, crazy technology to heal people, right? So you're specifically, like, taking this thing away from a character. So if I know something like that's going to happen, I would, or has a potential to happen, I would try and ask permission. In the case of Pine, with the, like, having their hair cut, it's not as big of a deal because when they leave this recursion, it can come back because the appearance is kind of up to the player when they shift recursions. So it is established in this recursion, Pine will always look this way, but in the next recursion, Pine won't. But I asked Claudia, and she's like, yes, that is okay. So that's kind of an example of you can do it beforehand when you're planning an episode, but you can also just do it in the moment. You can be like, hey, are you okay with that? Is that okay if this happens? I have this idea. And if the player says no, then don't do it, because that's not cool. But if a player says yes, then yeah, do it. So I think it's really important, like, to ask a player, be willing to ask things while you're there at a session. And say, like, yeah, are you okay with this happening? It's not a time, I actually wouldn't use OK Check-In for that, because OK Check-In is not specifically asking if the player is okay with a specific thing happening to them. OK Check-In is more of like a, how are you feeling right now? Are you feeling okay? With, like, the tension in this moment. I would say, like, if you want to do something like that to a character, use the words. Like, say, is it okay if they cut your hair? Or, like, they cut your hair, is that okay? And that's essentially, like, that's how that piece happened. Hrothgar asked about debriefing emotional situations. I'll go into, I want to go into that more in, like, a whole specific episode about safety at the table, because I think that's a really big piece. So I think I'm going to take a few more questions, and then I want to spend a little bit of time building some characters so we can kind of see what that looks like. There's a lot of debrief tools in LARP is my biggest recommendation to look at. I actually don't tend to do a lot of those. A lot of my players are performers, so they have a tendency to do their own feeling. But talking, just, like, spending time with your, like, I think one of the best things you can do is just spend some time with your players after a session, just being yourselves and not being your characters. And I think that's a really good way to deal with the potential for bleed. So have, like, interactions with each other that are not interactions with your characters. But I can get into more specifics. I need to look up some of the tools myself because I don't actually use a lot of them. But that is an excellent question. She just walked in, but she's lying on the floor.
What?
No, you're fine. No, you don't need to ask this. When you come on after EPK, that's definitely something we should talk a lot about.
Okay.
Because that's something that you had a lot of experience with, is debrief tools and what worked and what didn't work for your group.
I'm gonna say hi to everybody.
You're maybe on camera? I don't know. Probably.
I'm gonna go like on the floor now.
Yeah, go lay on the floor.
Okay.
And yeah, some different tools. Like I tend to do things like referring to my character in the third person. So when I was like, the dove does this rather than I do this, as a potential option. So. Ask for a moment. How would I plan differently if players take less initiative? Ooh, I'd probably just put more plot in, and just you just guide them more. We can talk a little bit about that, like planning and encouraging players to take initiative, and how to encourage. Yeah, encouraging players to take initiative. So helping players with RP and initiative. And talking about problem players, that's definitely. So I want to talk about talking about problem players. I think Katie asked, this is a long one. Setup times where players' backstory comes straight into focus and they dodge it, constantly asking for it. I mean, honestly, if a player doesn't bite, they don't bite, and you gotta talk. Like, it's just having a storyline that players don't bite into. Let's do this question, and then let's build a couple of characters. When they don't bite, it's tough because in the specific situation that Katie Sue's bringing up is like that's a player's asking for something and then they don't bite. But it sort of leads into like with that is communication is key. Is talking about them and being like, you didn't bite. Why didn't you bite? You've been asking for this. And then the next time they ask for it, because remember, you're doing this to have fun. So they're like, oh, but I want to have backstory stuff. And you can be like, well, last time you had it, you didn't do anything with it, so you don't get it anymore. But I'm also mean that way. So if someone's like, I want this thing, and then you give them the thing, and they're like, I don't want this thing, then I'll be like, you don't get the thing anymore, so stop asking for it. And if they're not biting in terms of, it's highlighting now, it's awesome.
Just randomly.
Yeah, and it took its sweet time. In terms of like overall plot stuff, if you're not biting, that's when I would check in with players and being like, this has been my plot. Like, is that a plot you guys are still interested in? Is there something you would be interested in more? Yeah, I think it's a great plan. Like, that's teacher lore, and that's the like, well, you asked for this, and then you said no, so you don't get it again. Like, you don't, next time, no. Someone else gets stuff. But if they all bite and ask for it, then sometimes I don't give it to them anyway because I'm a terrible human being. But that's also where you can kind of feel out and like see what did they bite for? Like what were they interested in? And let that guide your next direction for something that you can tie into what's happening. If they're like, oh, you presented this one NPC, but then they got super excited about this like other throwaway NPC, then you're like, how can I make that throwaway NPC not a throwaway and more important? And potentially cycle them back in to the overall story. So, I will keep a note of some of your questions. Would I be rather trying to get Ica involved rather than the front line against the raise? Yeah, I mean, you can also... one of my tactics is making the thing that I want them to do seem like the best thing to do. Works pretty well. And we can talk a little bit more about how I make things shiny. But I want us to build because I want us to get a little bit idea of how Cypher system works. Hold it here. I learned. But also, you can learn a little bit more about what is going to happen in our special two-part episode. So we're going to be using Cypher system for... you have to do that with a lot of throwaway NPCs. You're not wrong, Magic. We're going to be using Cypher system for our two-part Crossmas episode. Partly I'm using Cypher system because it is designed to be a generic RPG system that facilitates play in a bunch of different styles and settings. and I'm going to have to incorporate a bunch of different styles and settings. So I've got someone from Regency, England, someone from space, someone from Throne, which I don't know how best to describe that, but, you know, a land of demons and monsters and angels and comic book nonsense. I've got someone from vaguely modern day anime setting, and then I've got someone from vaguely modern day Earth strange setting. So all of those genres, super completely different, and people with very different abilities and powers. So we're going to kind of work through this system and build each character, and then from there I can start piecing together like the sorts of things that they could do. So Cypher system has a 3-part character building process. The Y in system is upside. Oh, this one. You're right. System. Cypher system. So the Cypher system has, you make your character in 3 parts. You have an adjective, noun, that verb. So you are example using the strange. Pine is a graceful paradox that rides shiny and chrome. Strange is a little bit different because that last thing changes depending on the recursion that you go to. Cypher system. But everything else stays the same. In most Cypher games, all 3 of those things will stay constant throughout your game. So your adjective kind of explains like how you do things. Your noun is like the core, it's kind of the equivalent to your class, and then your verb is like your extra snazzy, fancy stuff. So Cypher is generic Numenera. Numenera uses it, the Strange uses it. This is the game for anyone who's watched like Callisto 6 on Geek and Sundry. That's what they're using over there. And that's like a superhero setting for it. What else do they have? They have a 3rd one that uses Cypher. Numenera, Strange, and... Did you say it? No. No, okay. There's like a 3rd one that they have. That's really gonna bother me that I can't remember. Cool. Thank you. But, Predation used it, but I don't think that's their 3rd main one. They have a main one. Predation is great. It uses the Dino one. And they all have, when they make a new setting for it, they come up with like more specific things. But this is the generic like core version of it. So, what they tend to start with in these is you actually, weirdly enough, you start with the middle of your sentence. You start with your noun. Because those are like your 3 basic classes. And in this one, there are 3 major ones. And we're going to have to pick which one everybody is. Character type. That's your noun. So, cool. Alright, they have warrior, adept, and... Do you have a better table of context for this for me to get my list? Nope.
He says invisible sun.
I think it might be based off of it, but maybe I'm just thinking something and it's not actually the case. It's cool. Warrior, adept, and explorer. I think they only have the 3. Oh, and they have speaker. Oh, they have 4 in this one. Cypher system has 1 more. I do wish they had a summary of each of them at the beginning. That would have made my life a lot easier to book. Cool. That's the big explorer. Excellent. So, if we break them down, and they also give you like flavors for if you're doing things with different type of setups. Yeah, it's basically warrior, thief, mage, bard. That is 100% what those are. And so the adept is kind of your magic user, your thief, sneaky person, and then your bard, your speaker. And it applies to a bunch of different settings. So, I'm gonna tell you, you're ready to hear who the characters are. You ready? So we've got Strawberry, Rachel, Ada, Oz, but I don't have to build Oz. Oz already exists. That makes my life easier. and the starling. Oh, Numenera and the Strange. Okay, well, I'm wrong. It's just what I assumed. So based on looking at those, I would assume it should still work that Oz is a spinner, because I think that I don't need him to be the generic version of what he is. Naturally, the Starling is the Explorer. That's the Thief class. You can choose Warrior, Adept, Explorer, and Speaker. I assume. So, Numa, yay. It's gonna be good. I'm very excited. So who do we want to start with? Who do you guys want to build? Who do we want to build? Yeah, I do. We want to build a warrior. I assume Strawberry is the warrior. So let's build Strawberry. Let's see what our good boy Strawberry is going to be. So Strawberry would be a warrior. That's the easiest one. Fantasy would be like warrior, fighter, swordsman, knight, barbarian. And we're going to just build them all at level 1. Will this tie into the canon of Worlds Beyond? I haven't decided yet. So we're going to start with Strawberry. And build our warrior. Barry is Punchy Puncher for sure. This is actually the hardest one for me because this is the only character I haven't extended seen in a game. So I'll be soliciting some input. So the warrior, the nice part about this system is it gives me a lot of their basic information. So the first thing that you do is you have your stat pools, which you have 3 stats in Cypher System. You have intellect, speed, and might. Set them in a very different order. What if all the recursions are just part of Kill 6 Billion Demons? But what if Kill 6 Billion Demons is just a recursion? So they give you your pools, and then you get 6 additional points to spend between them. And your pools are 2-part in Cypher System. They tell you how much effort you can spend, and they're also your health. So for example, in this instance, like, I know Barry is good at punching. So it starts off as a base of 10 might, 10 speed, and 8 intellect, and I can put more into any of them. 6 additional points, I could dump all 6 of them into might, which would make Barry very strong. He could spend a lot of points, but he wouldn't be able to do a lot of other tasks. It would give him a lot of health, because normally you take damage from your might pool first. But he would have a hard time. Yeah, fictional leakage can always happen, so it could be part of the canon. Might speed, which is a lot of your defense rolls. It's dodging, it's doing things quickly, being dexterous, using ranged weapons. And then intellect, which is mental and social tasks. My inclination would be to probably put most of it into might, because that seems like the most Strawberry thing to do. Because why not? But then I'll probably bump each of the other 2 pools up by a little bit. So, would it be fair to say maybe in this instance we keep intellect at an 8 and put like 2 points in speed and 4 points in might? So we get a 14 might. So he's going to be best at doing any might tasks. He'll be able to put a little bit of effort into speed tasks, but he's probably not going to be able to do any intellect tasks without it being particularly challenging for him. So let's do that. So 14. Oh, I always forget where you're supposed to put it on the character sheet. Because you spend from your pool, but you also take damage from your pool. Yeah, and you have to be strong if you want to punch the sun. So we're going to make him mostly might, a little bit of speed, and just not a lot of intellect. He's oddly deep. So one of the things that's important to note with Cypher System is just because you have a low value in a pool doesn't mean you're bad at it. It just means you can put effort towards it less often because you just don't have as many points to spend. It also means that you might have a harder time taking certain types of damage. So, like, just because Barry's intellect is the lowest pool that he has does not inherently mean he is not an intelligent character. It just means that if he's going to put effort into doing, like, a social interaction, it's going to cost him more points, where he can do that less often. So first tier warrior, his effort is 1, and that's the case for all characters. Effort is how many times you can spend points from your pool to make an activity easier. And everybody starts with 1 at level 1. We're just going to build tier 1 characters. Yeah, int tasks, that's probably a way to think about it, is like intelligence tasks are going to be more draining for his character, or just his ability to do it more often. So proportionally, each task takes more effort. It's more about his frequency of how often he can do it. He has a might edge of 1, a speed edge of 0, or a might edge of 0 and a speed edge of 1. An edge is a subtraction in Cypher system. So every time you spend from your pool, you take your edge away from that. Meaning that if I want to spend effort for a might task and I have an edge of 1, instead of it costing me the usual 3 points, it only costs me 1 point. And that's kind of your idea of how draining is it. So the higher your edge, the less draining it is for you to put effort into something. So there's an interesting part in the system where I could have a really high edge for a small pool. And it might mean that I can do it less often, but it's less draining for me to do it. So, like, for example, if I had an edge of 2, but a pool of only 8 points to spend, it would still be easier for me to spend points out of it more often. Perhaps it's that everyone thinks of him as a jock, so there's a hard time dealing with others on it. It's possible. Like, you can come up with a narrative explanation for this in any way you want. So I'm going to give him a might edge of 1 and a speed edge of 0 because, again, that seems like a thing for Barry. So it's easiest for him to spend points out of his might pool, and he has more points of those to spend. So he can punch the sun. Tier 1. Strawberry is a warrior. Where do I record? His cipher limit is 2. That's everybody's. So, now he gets a bunch of special abilities. The first one that he gets is it's going to be practiced with all weapons. That makes sense. Down. And so the equivalent of the warrior in Strange is the Vector, and that's Jade and Pine. So they are both practiced with all weapons, which means that anytime, I guess that's a skill. It means they can use any weapon. It makes it 1 easier for them to do that. Does the edge also have a DR aspect, or are you still squishy with high edges but a low pool? No, armor affects your damage reduction, so you're still squishy. But most of your damage goes out of might, and then out of speed, and then out of intellect, except for certain specific kinds of damage. Barry loves Venn diagrams. See? You can use any weapon. So, he now gets special abilities. So we get to choose 4 special abilities for him. You can't take the same one more than once. So our options, I'll just read you the names of them. Oh, there's a lot. There's a lot. Bash, control the field. Extra edge, no need for weapons. Overwatch, physical skills. Pierce, practice in armor, quick draw, swipe, thrust. Whew, there are a lot. So, we'll come back to that in a second. But the first thing that comes into my mind is I want to think about like what I know about Strawberry, which is that he punches things, and he likes to protect people. Those seem like 2 accurate statements about Strawberry. Like,
Yes.
punching people, punching
Loves his friends.
punching things, and protecting his friends seem like the 2 most important things. So I'm going to start by looking for abilities that let him do that. So Bash this is a pummeling melee attack. You attack inflicts 1 less point of damage than normal, but dazes your target. Interesting. Control the field. Deal less damage. No need for weapons. That's the one that we want. When you make an unarmed attack, it counts as a medium weapon instead of a light weapon. That sounds like Strawberry. He also likes to nap on rocks and sometimes eat them. But I call those not special abilities. We'll see. Getting stronger when you take damage. That might be possible. So we're going to go with, for sure, is Bash. Which means... I'm actually going to put this under attacks because it just means his unarmed attack is a medium weapon. And so medium weapons deal 4 points of damage instead of 2 in this system. He gets four attacks. Or 4 special abilities. So I think a punch counting as a medium weapon instead of a light weapon. So punching deals as much damage as him using a weapon. Eating rocks could be useful. We'll get to that if we build the other parts of this character. Let's see. No need for weapons. We got that one. Overwatch. Use a ranged weapon. No. We could get him trained in 2 physical skills. Pierce. Well-aimed penetrating range attack. Nope. Wear armor. Nah. Quick draw. Draw weapon. Swipe. Daze a target. Thrust. It's a stab. Deal more damage. Trained in armor. You are trained in speed defense actions when not wearing armor. Ooh, I like trained without armor. The physical skill ones is just I can give them training in 2 physical skills. So like that's a pretty good one to have. I think trained without armor makes sense because Strawberry doesn't wear armor, from what I know. I think he's fuzzy, right? This is what we're building a character that I don't know. So trained without armor. Oh. The sheet is different than I thought. Trained. Cool. Is there a grapple option? There may be under abilities that are not the warrior's ability. He wears no armor. We can switch over kind of whenever. So, I am going to continue working on this. I'll probably post some updates because I've got to. But, yeah, thank you, everybody. We're going to switch over. So, Anna's going to take over with some wind down. Think WWE fighter. I mean, that's where all of his makeup came from, didn't it? I've got a whole bunch of different things to talk about. So, we will look at these guys later. Do you want to just switch over dramatically or do you want to take like a minute? Cool. We're going to go to the BRB screen for a brief moment, and then Anna will be back. Thank you, everybody, for joining me next week. I won't be doing this, but we'll be back the following week with a possible post-mortem, a debrief, that's the word, on EPK. So we'll see you in just a few moments. Beer.